The hall was so quiet, I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. General Hale's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You just assaulted a Marine. She's pregnant." His words hung there, sharp, final. Every head in the room turned toward me. I stood motionless, the weight of my dress uniform heavy on my shoulders, blood slowly trailing down the edge of my white belt. My stepbrother, Jake Lawson, froze mid-step, his mouth half open, his arrogance stripped away in an instant. My vision blurred, but not from pain. It was disbelief, fury, and something far deeper, something breaking. The kind of break that doesn't make a sound, but you feel it in every nerve of your body. A medic rushed forward. My stepfather, Colonel Lawson, stumbled through his words. "Jake didn't." No, he didn't mean, but General Hale didn't even look at him. His voice went cold. He just cost this corps one of its finest, and a child who hadn't even drawn breath. I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because I could see it. On every stunned face, in every whispered gasp, they finally knew who I was. Not just Sarah Reeves, the quiet one at family dinners. I was Lieutenant Sarah Reeves, United States Marine Corps. Military intelligence, Level 3, clearance. But that title, that strength, none of it could stop what had already happened. He didn't mean to? No. He meant every word, every shove, every laugh. To understand how it came to this, how a family's pride turned into violence, you have to understand what it's like to be the invisible Marine in your own home. 6 months earlier, the air smelled like barbecue smoke and beer. My stepfather had gathered everyone in the backyard to celebrate Jake's promotion to assistant manager at the local hardware store. My mother beamed, the way she always did when Jake was involved. He was her husband's son, the golden one, the physical one. I had just come back from deployment. I'd saved lives in places they couldn't find on a map. But here, I was just extra. Jake clapped me on the shoulder, grinning. "Still playing secretary for the grunts, huh, Sarah? Should have joined the Girl Scouts." He said it loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough for my commanding officer, E's wife, who had stopped by to congratulate me on being recommended for captain. I saw her face falter, that flicker of discomfort as the joke landed wrong. My stepfather chuckled, as if to soften the blow. "Jake's just teasing," he said. "You know he's always been the physical one." I smiled back, the kind of smile that keeps peace while swallowing pride. Physical, sure. He always needed to be. Because if it couldn't be seen, it wasn't real to them. My work was invisible. Intelligence, encryption, classified operations. Jake's kind of strength, the kind they understood, was loud. Mine was silent. But silence has its own kind of power. They just hadn't learned that yet. And one day, they would. Family dinners were always the same stories, the same laughter, and the same subtle reminders that I didn't quite fit in. Jake Lawson, my stepbrother, 29, still coasting on the glory of being a high school quarterback, sat across from me, a beer in hand, his grin wide and careless. My stepfather, Colonel Lawson, a retired Marine who wore his rank like a crown, leaned back at the head of the table. To him, legacy wasn't earned, it was inherited, and I, the stepdaughter from my mother's first marriage, was never part of that inheritance. Jake pointed his fork at me. "You're always analyzing things. When are you going to do something real?" He said it with a smirk, like it was a joke, but it wasn't. "Not really," my stepfather chuckled. "She's got a desk job, son. Don't bust her chops." I set my fork down carefully, forcing my voice to stay even. "Dad, I've been stationed at Fort Meade, not behind a desk. My team—" He cut me off with a dismissive wave. "Intel, right? Paper pushers who think they're soldiers." My mother, Carol, gave that small, practiced smile, the one that always meant, "Please don't start trouble." She glanced at me, then back at her plate. I felt the silence expand like a bruise. The word paper pusher echoed in my head, dull and heavy. I looked at Jake, at the easy confidence of someone who had never earned anything but believed he deserved everything. He didn't even notice the way my knuckles had turned white around my napkin. He never did. No one did. That night, I barely touched my food. The laughter around the table blurred into background noise. Inside, I replayed every comment, every casual dismissal, each one another. Layer of insulation between me and the family I kept trying to reach. They thought they knew who I was. They didn't know half of it, because at work, my world was nothing like this one. At Fort Meade, I wasn't Sarah the stepdaughter. I was Lieutenant Reeves, Marine Intelligence. Inside the skiff, a secure room glowing with monitors and encrypted feeds, the air buzzed with quiet precision. My voice was steady as I briefed the task force on Operation Shadow Ridge. If the SIGINT patterns match the intercept, we'll initiate Alpha Protocol override. Target assets will be neutralized within 2 hours. No one interrupted. No one laughed. The officers listened. The senior commander nodded once. "Lieutenant Reeves," he said, his tone measured but firm, "you just saved us a dozen Marines." I met his eyes and replied, "Just doing my job, sir." That phrase had become second nature. Deflecting praise, minimizing credit. But inside, I felt something else. A quiet pride, anchored in the knowledge that my decisions carried weight. Weight that could save lives. In that room, I mattered. My word wasn't questioned. My authority wasn't a punchline. The screens glowed with data streams, coordinates, coded reports. All of it filtered through my analysis. It was my mind keeping those Marines alive halfway across the world. But outside those walls, at home, I was invisible again. Jake shotgunning beers in the backyard while my mother gushed about his work ethic. My stepfather telling stories about his days in Vietnam, each one swelling with nostalgia, each one ending with a pointed glance at me. His reminder that I'd never seen real combat. I thought to myself, he wouldn't last an hour in my world. Every time I walked through that front door, I felt my rank vanish. Captain in training turned back into the quiet girl who reads too much. It didn't matter how many commendations I earned, or how many operations I directed. To them, I was still the one who took the safe route. What they didn't know was that I'd been part of the team that intercepted an arms exchange in Eastern Europe, an operation that could have spiraled into international disaster. While Jake bragged about managing 3 employees, I was decrypting signals that determined who lived and who didn't. But I never said that. I couldn't. My work was classified, so I just nodded at their small talk, their shallow victories, their empty advice. It was easier to let them think they were right than to argue against ignorance. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in my car outside their house before going in. I'd look at the porch light, the one that flickered every few seconds, and think about how that was us. Flickering. Never steady. Never fully bright. In the core, my words carried weight. At home, they evaporated before they even left my mouth. In uniform, I gave orders that could move aircraft. Out of it, I couldn't even move a conversation. The duality was exhausting, but I learned something watching them. Something that changed me. They didn't respect empathy or intellect or discipline. They respected dominance. Power they could see. I'd spent years trying to speak their emotional language, trying to prove I was enough in ways that didn't register to them. But rank isn't what they respect. It's presence. And one day, I promised myself, they would learn exactly what mine meant. So, I stopped trying to earn their approval. I stopped chasing their version of validation. Instead, I started preparing for the moment they'd have to face who I really was. The email came in at 0400. Standard notification protocol, no fanfare, no ceremony. Just a line of text confirming what I'd spent years earning. Effective immediately, promotion to captain, United States Marine Corps. I stared at the words for a long time, letting them sink in. No one was awake to tell. And even if they were, I wouldn't have. Not yet. Most people would call their families first, but not mine. I knew how it would go. My mother, Carol, would say she was proud, her voice cautious, as if pride in me might somehow offend someone else. My stepfather, Colonel Lawson, would nod approvingly, then immediately shift the focus to his son. And Jake would make a joke about how even the Marines are desperate these days. I could already hear it. So instead of telling them, I did something else. I went through official channels and added their names to the guest list. Lawson Robert Rhett, Lawson Jake. There was something deeply satisfying about typing those names into the secure system, each keystroke deliberate, almost surgical. This wasn't an invitation. It was an education. When I handed the finalized list to General Hale, my commanding officer, he glanced over it, then back at me. "You sure about inviting them, Lieutenant?" His tone wasn't judgmental, just wary. He'd seen enough family dynamics play out badly to know the risks. I smiled, a small, controlled smile. "They've spent their whole lives telling me I wasn't one of you, sir. I think it's time they see what one of you really means." He nodded slowly, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Then let's make sure they see it clearly." The next few weeks were a blur of preparation, uniform fittings, protocol reviews, base security walkthroughs. Every detail mattered. Every thread, every salute, every line recited would be done to perfection. Because that ceremony wasn't just a formality. It was proof. I remember standing in front of the mirror the morning of the photography session. My reflection looked back at me. Polished brass, white gloves, measured confidence. I adjusted the crease on my sleeve. Then my gaze dropped, almost involuntarily, to my abdomen. I rested a hand there for a moment. Barely a secret yet, but one I carried quietly, my own private victory. I had planned to tell no one until after the ceremony. Sometimes I caught myself imagining how my stepfather would look in that auditorium, stiff-backed, proud, pretending to understand the protocol, and Jake, restless, checking his phone, rolling his eyes at every mention of duty or honor. They'd come for the photo op, not the meaning. That was fine, because what they didn't know was that they'd be stepping into my world, not dragging me into theirs. When the RSVPs came back, I could almost smell the arrogance through the words. "We'll be there, proud of our girl," my mother had written. But pride from them had always been conditional. Earned, on their terms, never mine. I closed my laptop and exhaled slowly. The invitations were sent. The RSVPs came back, full of pride, beer breath, and bad memories. They thought it was my big day. They didn't realize it was also my last day trying to belong to them. The morning of the ceremony, the air felt heavier than usual. Even the sky above Quantico seemed to hold its breath. Rows of Marines stood in perfect formation, their uniforms sharp, their faces solemn. The Marine band played softly in the distance, a quiet hum of brass and precision. I stood among them, steady, composed, hiding the tremor that had started deep in my chest hours ago. In the front row, my family sat exactly as I'd imagined. My stepfather, Colonel Lawson, had that rigid posture only men who lived in the shadow of their own glory could maintain. My mother, Carol, sat beside him, her hands folded, her expression somewhere between pride and tension. And then there was Jake, my stepbrother, slouched in his seat, sunglasses on, smirking like he was at a school play instead of a military base. When General Hale stepped to the podium, the sound of his boots echoed against the concrete. For exemplary performance during Operation Shadow Ridge, resulting in the prevention of an arms transfer and the saving of us lives, he said, his voice carrying across the parade ground. Lieutenant Sarah Reeves is promoted to captain, United States Marine Corps. Applause filled the hall. Sharp, thunderous, unified. My fellow Marines saluted. My family clapped politely, the way you might for a niece graduating from college. A gesture of politeness, not understanding. They didn't grasp what this meant. That this wasn't just a promotion. It was validation written in the language of sacrifice and command. I stepped forward, saluted the general, and received my new insignia. The metal felt cold against my palm. I didn't smile. Marines don't smile for milestones. They earn them. When I looked toward the crowd, Jake raised his hand in mock salute, grinning. That grin was the same one he'd worn the night he told me I'd never last in a man's branch. After the ceremony, there was a small reception in the hangar. Officers shook my hand. A few offered quiet congratulations. My family lingered at the back, awkward and out of place among the crisp uniforms and formal decorum. I had just finished speaking to a junior officer when I heard Jake's voice carry across the room. Guess promotions come easy when you've got the right look, huh? Conversations around us stalled. My heart sank, but I kept my composure. Jake, not here, I said quietly. He laughed, loud and sharp. Oh, come on, Sarah, it's a joke. You can take a joke, right? Or is this another one of your classified tantrums? I turned to face him fully. You're on federal property. Don't make this worse for yourself. The smirk twisted into something meaner. What are you gonna do? Arrest me? He spat, stepping closer. And before I could even react, he slammed his boot into my abdomen. The pain was instant and blinding. My body folded, breath stolen. I hit the ground, the sound of my knees cracking against the concrete drowned by a collective gasp. A bead of blood slid down my uniform, tracing a perfect line over the white belt I'd spent an hour polishing that morning. Then came the roar. You just assaulted a Marine, she's pregnant. General Hale's voice boomed through the hall, heavy with authority and fury. Every officer in the room froze. Jake's expression faltered, confusion flashing for a split second before fear set in. 2 MPs moved in, grabbing his arms. He resisted for half a second before being forced to the ground. My stepfather stood frozen, his face drained of color. Hale turned toward him, his words cutting through the stunned silence. This is your legacy? Your son just attacked a decorated officer in front of the Corps. I could feel my mother's sob catch in her throat. No one moved to help her. Hale's fury wasn't the kind that could be softened. It was the righteous kind, the kind that came from years of service, of seeing the line between honor and shame drawn too many times. As they cuffed Jake, I caught his eye. There was no remorse there, only disbelief, as if he still couldn't comprehend that this world operated on rules he didn't control. I straightened slowly, one hand pressed against my abdomen. The ache was sharp, deep, a wound I knew went beyond the physical. The medics guided me out quietly, but the silence that followed me wasn't pity, it was reverence. In that moment, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the quiet stepdaughter sitting at the edge of family dinners. I was Captain Reeves, a Marine who had earned every ounce of her title. Later that night, in the sterile calm of the infirmary, General Hale came by. He stood at the doorway for a moment, then said softly, "The footage confirms everything. He's being charged. You won't have to see him again." I nodded, staring at the faint red stain on my folded uniform. My mind drifted back to all those dinners, all those moments I'd been told to let it go, to not take things so seriously. For years I thought recognition would heal me, that if they just saw me succeed, it would make the pain worth it. But standing there, staring at my blood on that floor earlier, I realized some things aren't meant to be redeemed. That kind of pain doesn't build bridges, it burns them. As I sat in silence, I remembered something my stepfather used to say. Rank is earned by the men who lead He never imagined the day would come when he'd have to salute mine. The days after the ceremony blurred together. Hospital lights, the sterile smell of antiseptic, the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor that wasn't mine. My body healed faster than I expected. My mind didn't. The quiet was the worst part. It was in that quiet that the truth settled in. I'd lost the baby. The one life I'd been protecting in secret. The one piece of softness I'd allowed myself to have. Gone, because my stepbrother couldn't stand the sight of me standing taller than him. Jake faced formal charges for assaulting a federal officer. The military doesn't play favorites when it comes to violence on its own ground. General Hale made sure of that. Colonel Lawson tried to interfere, calling in old favors, insisting it was a family matter, but no one listened. The whispers spread quickly through the veteran circles. The proud colonel, who'd raised a son who disgraced. The Corps. His invitations to events dried up. The men who used to greet him with firm handshakes now looked away when he entered a room. I spent a week in recovery. Hale visited on the third day. He stood by the doorway, the kind of man who knew when silence was more comforting than words. Then he said quietly, "I can't replace what you lost, Captain. But I can promise you this. Every Marine on this base knows your name for the right reasons." I wanted to thank him, but my throat locked up. Instead, I nodded. That was enough. When he left, I sat there staring at the folded uniform on the chair. Beside my bed, the same one still stained faintly along the belt. I should have asked for a new one, but I didn't. The stain was proof. Proof that I had survived both war zones. The one overseas and the one called home. Months passed. The investigation concluded. Jake was convicted, sentenced to time served and probation, but barred from entering any federal property for 5 years. It wasn't justice, not really, but it was closure. The colonel never visited. My mother sent flowers once, small white lilies that smelled too much like apology. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. 1 year later, I walked into my new office at Fort Meade. The nameplate on the door read, Captain Sarah Reeves, Marine Intelligence Command. My own unit, my own command. My name finally carried the weight it deserved. A young recruit, barely 20, saluted nervously as I passed. His hand trembled. "Morning, ma'am?" he said. I smiled, returning the salute. "Morning, Corporal. You'll steady that hand soon enough." It was strange. The calm that followed chaos. My days were full, structured, purposeful. Reports to sign, missions to oversee, recruits to train. But in the rare, quiet moments, I would still think back to that day. The sound of Hale's voice echoing across the hall. The way my stepfather's face had drained of color when he realized the weight of what he'd allowed. And the blood on my belt, sharp against the white. A mark that never really faded, even after it washed out. That afternoon, as I reviewed an encrypted report, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was my mother. "We want to see you." "Jake's. Sorry." I stared at it for a long moment. The ellipsis felt deliberate, like even she didn't believe the words that followed. I thought about all the years of silence, the dinners where I'd been talked over, the holidays where I'd been seated at the far end of the table. I thought about the years I'd mistaken endurance for love. Then I hit archive. They always said, blood makes you family. But sometimes blood is what separates you. Outside my office window, the flag moved steadily in the wind. Strong, unwavering. I watched it for a while, the rhythm of it grounding me. There was peace in knowing I didn't need their validation anymore. My legacy wasn't something they could give me or take away. It was built in the quiet, in the choices I made when no one was watching. I walked to the edge of the observation deck, overlooking the base airfield. The sun was setting, painting the hangars in golden shadow. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Not because they saw me, but because I finally saw myself. My stepbrother thought breaking me would prove his strength. But true strength isn't what you show in a fight. It's what you build back in silence. If you've ever had to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it, share your story below. In this community, your courage is recognized.